Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel, Hierarchy of Reads. My name is Tiffany and long time no see. I'm here today to kind of get back into the booktube rigmarole with but of course a book haul. These are going to be the books that I have kind of collected over the past 6 months of 2019, and I thought that I would share them all with you today. For those of you who don't know, I did start my graduate program in clinical psychology this fall, and so that's really been a big factor as to why I've kind of disappeared and haven't been very active. It was kind of a learning curve for me trying to figure out how to manage my time, how to get everything done, and so I'll talk more about that in a video that's coming up soon, which I hope to be kind of a chatty catch-up video. But in the meantime, I hope that you all have been doing well. So I have quite a significant stack here, and the first couple books that I want to go over are actually books that I've picked up because of one of my classes. In my abnormal psychology course, one of our main projects that we had was to read a memoir or biography of a person who struggled with a given mental disorder, and we had to, of course, read their memoir, which talked about their experiences and all of that, and then after reading it, we had to write a paper talking about whether or not we agree with their disorder that they were diagnosed with, and we had to give evidence discussing diagnostic criteria. We also had to talk about potential contributing factors as talked about through the author's direct experiences and potential treatments. And after this paper, we also had to present our findings to our class, and so I became familiar with a number of memoirs and biographies that I thought were very interesting. More than just what I've picked up here, but I kind of limited myself on how many I could buy until I get through these. The first of which is Darkness Visible, A Memoir of Madness by William Styron. This book is about William Styron's experiences with depression, and from what I understand, he writes this in a hauntingly beautiful manner. The person who presented this in my class, she included a few excerpts of his writing, and it was just so sad and touching, and I'm looking forward to reading this, but also a little bit nervous about it because of just how kind of deep he goes into his bouts of depression. I also picked up the ever controversial Sybil by Flora Rita Schreiber. I don't know much about the controversy surrounding this book other than that there is one, and that whether or not Sybil did have multiple personality disorder, at least to the extent that's written about here, is kind of in question by a lot of people. My idea is that I want to read the book first and then kind of do some more back research because I don't want to read the book looking for a given outcome, if that makes sense. So I am kind of looking forward to reading this one. I also picked up the book Girl Interrupted by Susanna Kaysen, and I don't remember exactly what this one is about. I know that the author who writes this, of course, talks about her time, I think being hospitalized, but I don't know much about it beyond that. So I am hoping to get to this pretty soon. And finally, we have Loud in the House of Myself by Stacy Pershaw, and I think this is about the author's experiences with bipolar disorder and borderline personality disorder. And so this one sounded very interesting to me too. The next book that I picked up that's kind of in line with these, but I didn't decide to pick it up based on a presentation that I had in class, is this very kind of messy copy of The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. I decided to pick this up from Thrift Books, and I don't know if any of you use Thrift Books to buy your books, but I have been kind of frustrated with them the last couple of years because I typically pay a couple extra dollars for the very good condition or like new condition, and I purchased this in like new condition, and I don't know if you can really see it on camera, but it is, and this is better than it was. I've had this, sitting under a heavy stack of books to kind of flatten it out, but it has stains everywhere. There's pages that are ripped and bent and stained, and the cover is all and that's been kind of my experience with Thrift Books for a while. And I wouldn't mind if I was paying the cheaper prices for the conditions that aren't as nice, but I don't know if I'm going to continue using them if they cannot kind of be reliable in their quality. But either way, I am looking forward to reading this book. Another book that I picked up from Thrift Books that actually did come in very good condition though is Saplings by Noelle Stratfield. And I purchased this for no other reason than it's a Persephone Classics books, and to try to get Persephone Classics in the United States is very difficult and expensive by the time you pay for shipping in the book itself. So whenever I find them in a used bookstore or on Thrift Books, I just kind of pick it up. So I don't know much about this. I do believe it's a wartime fiction novel. I don't know which war though, and I don't think it says here. But I do know I read that it talks about how the war affects this family, and I do like reading about war and how it affects daily life and daily living and kind of people's philosophy. So I am looking forward to picking this one up soon as well. Another book that I have picked up but also have already read was Anthem by Ayn Rand. And Ayn Rand is one of those authors that I've heard a lot about but don't really know anything about. And so when I saw this, I saw it was short, and I decided, you know what, I can read that pretty quickly, let me pick it up. So I did, and it was an experience. I think that the story in and of itself is fine. It was pretty meh. However, I think the underlying philosophy that goes into this was lacking in nuance and complexity. And I don't want to say too much because I don't know much about the author's philosophy, and I don't know much about the context necessarily. I do have to do a little bit more research. But I will say that I kind of found it to be a little bit ironic. But I'll go more into this book later when I do a wrap up very soon. The next set of books that I picked up is actually for my nephew for Christmas, because I'm always late on Christmas gifts. And that is this little golden book library set of Spider-Man books. My nephew is about 4.5 years old now, and he loves Marvel and all things Spider-Man. And so of course, if I can find a book format to entertain him with, then I'm gonna get it. So this set has 5 books, including Spider-Man, just Spider-Man, Trapped by the Green Goblin, High Voltage, Night of the Vulture, and the Big Night of the Vulture, and the Big Freeze. So that's kind of exciting. I kind of wish they weren't wrapped in plastic so I could read them and he wouldn't know and then give it to him. But you know, it's for kids, not for me, I guess. So hopefully he likes them. Another book that I picked up was one that I started listening to an audiobook and really enjoyed it, but then my audiobook expired and I had to return it to the library before I was able to finish it, so I decided to purchase it. And that is The Woman Who Smashed Codes, A True Story of Love, Spies, and the Unlikely Heroine Who Outwitted America's Enemies by Jason Fagone. And this book was such a pleasure to listen to. It was so, I almost want to say magical, which sounds weird. It sounds like a strange way to describe a nonfiction book, but it was just so fascinating. I think I ended at the point where the main person that this book talks about, Elizabeth, how she kind of got introduced to cryptography. And I forgot the gentleman's name, but this fancy pants investor who had something called, I think, Riverbank Laboratories, in which he hired a bunch of scientists and a bunch of researchers and a bunch of people to just conduct research on a number of different topics at his estate. And that in and of itself was just, I think, the magical part, because it just seemed so strange and such a weird situation. But it's real, and I really enjoyed kind of listening to Elizabeth's story. At the same time that I started this, I was also reading Rosemary, which is a nonfiction book about Rosemary Kennedy, and it was talking about her mom at the time that I was reading this, and Rosemary's life and how she was growing up. And it was very interesting to see the juxtaposition, because these two things were kind of, these two people existed around the same time, and so just to see their different experiences and how they handled different limitations as women was very, very interesting as well, and I really enjoyed it, and I hope to finish this very soon. Another book that I picked up randomly when I saw it at the used bookstore was Blindness by Jose Saramago. And I picked this up for no other reason other than that I read Cain by Saramago a couple of years ago and really enjoyed his writing. I loved his wit and sarcasm, and I don't know if this book will be written in a similar style, but I remember saying that I wanted to read anything that I saw of his, and so when I saw this for $2, I couldn't resist. Another book that I picked up kind of on a whim at the used bookstore is Beasts of No Nation by Uzodinma Awila. I really need to start looking up names and their pronunciation before I film videos. But I don't know much about this. I did actually watch the movie a couple of years ago, but I don't remember the main plot line, just that it was very disturbing and upsetting. And I remember thinking that should I ever come across the book, I wanted to pick it up. And so when I did, I did. Another book that I have picked up and already read is Just Mercy, A Story of Justice and Redemption by Bryan Stevenson. I picked this up for Olive's read-along of this book. It's a book that was on my to-read list for quite a few years, but had never gotten to it. So her read-along was kind of the perfect excuse to finally get to it. And I'm so glad that I did. This book was so important. I think this is one of the most impactful it was the most impactful book that I read in 2019. It's about Bryan Stevenson and his experiences as an attorney for people who are on death row, and pretty much always for the wrong reasons. And the main story that he talks about throughout this book is his experiences with a man who was on death row for a crime he clearly did not commit, and it talks about the challenges in getting him out of death row and out of prison, and kind of obstacles and issues that are alive and present in the criminal justice system, as well as the things that we kind of take advantage and don't think about, and why we should think about them. I ended up rating this book 5 stars, and again, I really think it's one of those books that everybody should read. Another book that I picked up recently is Lysistrata by Aristophanes. My lack of familiarity with ancient Greek culture and mythology, I think, kind of puts a damper on what I get out of reading something like this, but I have been wanting to get into Greek plays and comedies and tragedies a little bit more, and so when I read a book for that same class that I talked about earlier, which was Lucky by Alice Sebold, she spoke about how she read this in one of her English classes and kind of what it meant to her, and that she enjoyed it, and so I decided to pick it up and read it, and I definitely am glad that I did. The final 3 books that I have are historical fiction books that I kind of picked up on a whim. I've heard people talk about these throughout the years, and they have sounded interesting to me, and so I purchased them again on Thrift Books, and actually these all came in pretty good condition, but I don't know much about them, so I'm just going to quickly go through them. The first one is Washington Black by Essie Adugian. I'm sorry, I'm mispronouncing your name, and I'm pretty sure of it. But I heard Eric Carl Anderson talk about this on his channel, and it sounded very, very interesting, so I wanted to pick it up. And I think it was also his channel that I heard about As Meat Loves Salt by Maria McCann, and that's why I picked this one up as well. And that leaves the last one, which is Melmoth by Sarah Perry, the writer of The Essex Serpent, which I also still have not read. But I don't know much about this other than it's about a kind of supernatural entity, and it's historical fiction, and that apparently Sarah Perry writes very, very well. And so I wanted to read this one. So Thrift Books, couldn't resist it, even with its quality issues. So yes, those are all of the books that I have picked up within the last 6 months or so of 2019. I look forward to kind of integrating myself back into the community, getting to catch up with you all. I'd love to know what books you've recently hauled, but until the next time we meet, I hope all is well and that you have a lovely new year.